A lot of the power inside of the animated library comes from interpolation. You're able to do interpolations on interpolations, and it will still be reactive regardless of a timing or anything else that is triggering the animation. So let's go down to our render function and set up our first interpolation. We'll say const animated interpolate is equal to this.state.animation, which is our animated value, and call interpolate, which takes an object and takes an input range and an output range. The input range will be what looks at the animated value and then determines how it should be interpolated to the output range. The input range must also always be increasing. So when we say our input range, we couldn't do 2, 1, 0. We would have to do 0, 1, 2. The interpolate input range does not necessarily have to start at 0. It could start at any number, so we could say -1, but it just always must be increasing. Now we'll define our output range. Our output range can be anything and doesn't have to be in an increasing fashion. So in our case, we'll say 0, because at the 0 mark, we don't want anything happening. Then at the 1 mark of our animation, we'll say 300, and then we'll bring it back down to 0 once we hit 2. So now that we have an interpolation, let's go ahead and set up some animated styles. So we'll say const animated styles is equal to transform here. And we'll pass this into a translate y and pass an animated interpolate. And now that we have our styles, we can take this and place it on our box. And so now when we refresh here and we trigger our animation by pressing on the start animation, our animation will run and it will then go from 0 to 1. And once that is complete, then it will quickly go to 2, which will kind of reset back to 0. So one thing to note is that when we do an interpolation, it returns a new animated value. What that means is we can interpolate off of our interpolation. So we'll say const interpolate, and we'll set up an interpolation to control our opacity. So we'll say animated interpolate, and we are no longer operating off of the 0, 1, 2 input range. We're actually operating off of the 0, 300, 0. So the output range of an interpolate will become the input range of another interpolate. So that means our input range will be 0 to 300, and our output range will be 1 to 0.5. So this will map to an opacity, and this will basically, as this moves towards 300, this will move towards from 1 to 0.5, and then this, as it moves from 300 back to 0, this will basically move from 0.5 back to 1. Now let's apply our interpolation to our opacity. So we'll say opacity, paste in our interpolate, and now when we refresh this, we can see as it moves towards 300, it hits the 0.5 opacity, and then it goes back to of 1 opacity. Now let's do one more interpolation. We could technically interpolate off of this interpolate, but we'll continue and off of our animated interpolate up above. So we say const translate x interpolate is equal to animated interpolate, and that will take an input range and an output range. And our input range will be something crazy like input range 0, 30, 50, 80, 100, 150, 299, and 300. It doesn't matter how many values are in your input range, you must just have the same amount of values in the output range. And so for our output range, it doesn't even matter what the values are here either. So we can say 0 and do the exact opposite, -30, -50, jump all the way back to 80, back to negative, we'll go to 300, and then 0, and then -100. So these are close together. So in a very quick span of time, it will jump from 0 to -100. So now we can take this and put it into a new transform, translate x. And now we refresh this. And so when we press on this, all at the same time, we will go from 0 to 300, translate y. Our opacity will go from 1 to 0.5 and back to 1. And then we will do this crazy sequence of events.